This abandoned house is listed for $165,000, and once it is repaired, similar finished houses in the area could sell for around $325,000. That is a difference of $160,000. So, at first this looks simple. Buy the house, fix it, sell it, and keep whatever is left. But then I found two numbers that made the whole thing stop making sense. In 2025, the typical American house flip created a gross spread of about $65,981, but a 2026 survey of active flippers placed average renovation spending at roughly $79,000. The renovation figure was larger than the entire gross spread, so if the repairs can cost more than the amount the house increased in value, where is the profit actually coming from? I started with the same calculation most people would probably make. The property costs $165,000. The renovation costs $70,000, and the finished house sells for $325,000. $325,000 minus $165,000 minus $70,000 leaves $90,000. That sounds like a very successful project. It also makes the business easy to understand. The investor finds the ugliest house on the street. They repair the roof, replace the kitchen, paint the walls, clean up the garden, then they sell the house to a normal buyer for much more than they paid. My first assumption was that the renovation created the profit, but I had only counted the two most visible costs. I had counted the house, and I had counted the repairs. I had not counted the cost of finding the property, buying it, financing it, protecting it, owning it while nothing happens, selling it, or managing the entire project. So, before accepting the $90,000 profit, I wanted to know whether house flipping really produces numbers like this in the real world. In 2025, approximately 297,000 homes were flipped in the United States. That was around 7.4% of all home sales. So this is not a tiny internet side hustle. It is a real market involving hundreds of thousands of properties. And the headline numbers appear strong. The typical flipped property created a gross spread of about $65,981. The reported gross return was around 25.5% before expenses. At first, that sounds like someone could make the equivalent of a yearly salary from one house. But the important word is gross. The $65,000 figure is only the difference between what the investor paid and what the house later sold for. It does not subtract the renovation. It does not subtract the loan. It does not subtract insurance, taxes, utilities, or selling costs. It does not even subtract the investor's own time. And that creates the first contradiction. The reported gross spread was about $65,981. The surveyed renovation figure was approximately $79,000. Subtract the renovation figure from the gross spread, and the result is negative $13,019. Those two numbers do not describe one identical house, so that does not mean the average flip automatically loses $13,000. But it proves something important. The number people call profit may disappear before most of the actual expenses are even counted. So the investor cannot simply be getting paid because the house sells for more. The real answer has to begin with why the property was cheap in the first place. An abandoned house is usually the cheap for a reason. The roof may leak, the foundation may be moving, the plumbing may be broken, the electrical wiring may be missing. There could be mold behind the walls, lead paint, asbestos, unpaid taxes, code violations, illegal additions, or a title problem that makes ownership difficult to transfer. A normal home buyer usually wants a property that can be inspected, financed, insured, and occupied. An abandoned house may offer none of those things, so the investor is not simply buying an ugly building. They are buying uncertainty that other buyers cannot confidently price, and the low purchase price is supposed to compensate them for accepting that uncertainty. In this model, the house costs $165,000. The projected finished value is $325,000. But that $325,000 is not money the investor has today. It is a prediction about what a future buyer may pay months later. The actual sale could be lower. Our low case is $300,000. The base case is $325,000, and the high case is $350,000. That means the investor commits money today using an exit price that can move $25,000 in either direction. The visible difference between the purchase and the expected sale is $160,000, but that entire amount has to pay for every problem between the abandoned house and the finished one. So the investor is not really buying a $165,000 house. They're buying a possible $160,000 pool of costs and profit. And now the question becomes much clearer. How much of that $160,000 survives after every expense is removed? I started with $325,000 of revenue. Then I removed the $165,000 used to buy the property. That left a visible spread of $160,000. Next came the renovation. $70,000. That included roughly $35,000 for direct labor, $31,000 for materials, and $4,000 for disposal and related fees. After the renovation, $90,000 remained. That was the number from my original calculation. But this is where the invisible costs began. Before the renovation even started, the investor still had title work, inspections, closing expenses, and due diligence. That removed another $5,000. Now $85,000 remained. Then came financing. A project like this may use a short-term investor loan rather than a normal owner-occupier mortgage. The modeled financing cost was $12,000. That reduced the remaining amount to $73,000. But the house also costs money simply because the investor owns it. Property taxes, vacant property insurance, electricity, water, security, garden maintenance, and temporary repairs. Those holding expenses removed another $6,000. Now $67,000 remained. Financing and holding together cost $18,000. That means time itself had already taken more than half of the final profit we would eventually calculate. Then the finished property had to be sold. The model reserves $26,000 for selling and closing expenses. After that deduction, only $41,000 remained. Then I counted the cost of finding the abandoned property. The acquisition model assumes $50 for each qualified seller lead, 20 qualified leads for one completed purchase. That creates approximately $1,000 of marketing cost for the property that actually closes. Now, $40,000 remained. And finally, I counted the investor's own project management labor. Finding contractors, reviewing bids, checking the work, handling inspections, speaking with the lender, solving delays, and preparing the property for sale. I assigned $10,000 to that labor. After every cost was included, the economic profit was $30,000. The house still worked, but the result was nothing like the first calculation. The apparent profit was $90,000. The complete modeled economic profit was $30,000. $60,000 of the apparent profit belonged to expenses that were missing from the simple version. And now I had a much more uncomfortable question. If a project that goes according to plan only creates $30,000, what happens when one of the estimates is wrong? The first risk is the resale price. The base model assumes the finished house sells for $325,000. But if it sells for $300,000 instead, the economic profit falls from $30,000 to approximately $7,000. The house only lost 7.7% of its expected resale value, but the investor lost more than 3/4 of the expected profit. The same effect also works in the other direction. If the house sells for $350,000, the modeled economic profit rises to approximately $53,000. A $25,000 change in the sale price creates a much larger percentage change in the investor's profit. The exit price acts like leverage, but the resale value is only one uncertain estimate. The renovation can change even more dramatically. In the hidden damage scenario, the house is still purchased for $165,000, but after demolition begins, the renovation rises from $70,000 to $105,000. The finished house also sells for $315,000 instead of $325,000. Then the rest of the costs continue. $5,000 for acquisition and closing, $18,000 for financing, $9,000 for holding, $25,200 for selling, $1,000 for acquisition marketing, and $10,000 for owner labor. The final result is not a smaller profit. It is a $23,200 economic loss. The investor did not need the entire housing market to collapse. The repair budget increased by $35,000. The resale value missed the original target by $10,000. And the deal reversed. Then there is time. If the resale price falls by 5% and the project takes 6 months longer, the $30,000 base profit falls to approximately $3,050. The project still technically makes money, but the investor carries almost all the original risk for almost none of the reward. And when a 20% renovation overrun is combined with a 5% resale decline, the model produces an economic loss of approximately $10,950. That is why the break-even number matters. In the base model, the house must sell for approximately $292,400 just to avoid losing money. The projected sale is $325,000. So the margin above break-even is only around $32,600. Then I tested the purchase price. To preserve a $30,000 target profit at a $325,000 resale value, the maximum modeled purchase price is approximately $165,000. If the investor becomes excited at an auction and pays $185,000 instead, the expected profit falls to approximately $10,000. A $20,000 bidding mistake removes 2/3 of the expected profit before a single wall is opened, and that changed the investigation. I started by asking how much value the renovation could add, but the renovation does not rescue a bad purchase. The real question is how cheaply the investor must buy the uncertainty for the project to survive. The profit is created at purchase, but even if the purchase price is correct, does $30,000 justify the amount of money needed to begin? A financed flip does not require the investor to pay the entire project cost in cash, but it still requires substantial liquidity. The modeled first project needs around $33,000 for a 20% purchase contribution, $5,000 for closing, title work, and inspections, between $5,000 and $9,000 for loan fees and initial interest, between $10,000 and $20,000 for renovation spending before reimbursements, between $15,000 and $25,000 as a contingency reserve, between $2,000 and $4,000 for insurance, utilities, and security, and approximately $1,000 for acquisition marketing. That creates a startup liquidity range of roughly $71,000 to $97,000. The expected base economic profit is $30,000. So the investor may need access to more than twice the expected profit before the project even begins. That makes this difficult to treat as a casual weekend side hustle. In the weekend model, the owner completes one property per year because contractors perform more of the work and the owner still sacrifices evenings and weekends to inspections, decisions, and emergencies. The economic profit falls to approximately $16,000 per year. Averaged across 12 months, that is around $1,333 per month. That is not nothing. but it is a small annual reward compared with $71,000 to $97,000 of startup liquidity and the possibility of a five-figure loss. The full-time model is stronger. 3 completed properties per year. At $30,000 of deal level economic profit each creates $90,000. After $12,000 of additional annual overhead, the full-time model produces approximately $78,000 in annual economic profit. That begins to resemble a credible full-time income. But it requires a steady supply of discounted properties, reliable contractors, and enough capital to manage overlapping projects. Then there is the scalable version. 8 properties per year at $30,000 of deal level profit creates $240,000, but scale introduces new costs: acquisition staff, project management, administration, software, payroll, and more simultaneous borrowing. After $96,000 of central payroll and overhead, the scalable model produces approximately $144,000 in annual economic profit. That is more money. But it is not the original $30,000 profit multiplied 8 times without friction. The operator may now own several unfinished houses when local prices weaken. A contractor problem can affect multiple projects, and every delayed property competes for the same cash. Scale multiplies the system. It also multiplies the number of things that can go wrong at the same time. And there is one final comparison. The initial liquidity requirement is $71,000 to $97,000. The base economic profit is $30,000 per successful project. So it may take around 3 comparable successful flips to earn an amount equal to the original liquidity requirement. At 3 flips per year, that is approximately 1 year of successful execution. One hidden damage loss can extend that recovery much further. So would I do it? Not as a casual first side hustle. The weekend model only produces around $16,000 per year while placing a large amount of capital at risk. As a full-time business, the $78,000 model becomes more credible, and the scalable version can reach $144,000, but only if the operator can repeatedly buy properties with enough margin of safety. That means the final verdict cannot depend on how beautiful the renovation looks. It has to depend on whether the numbers remain attractive after the purchase price. Contingency, owner labor, and downside risk are all included. So I scored the business using the numbers we had already uncovered. Revenue potential scores 8 out of 10. A finished property may sell for between $300,000 and $350,000 in this model. But revenue is not profit. Base economic profit scores 6 out of 10. $30,000 from one completed project is meaningful, but it is much smaller than the visible $160,000 spread. Startup affordability scores 3 out of 10. The estimated $71,000 to $97,000 of required liquidity excludes most beginners immediately. Customer acquisition scores 6 out of 10. The model only assigns around $1,000 of direct marketing to the purchased property, but it also requires 20 qualified seller leads, repeated follow-up, and many offers that may never close. Risk tolerance scores 3 out of 10. The base project creates $30,000. The hidden damage scenario loses $23,200, and the combined renovation and resale mistake loses approximately $10,950. Weekend suitability scores 3 out of 10. $16,000 per year is not enough to make the capital requirement and operational risk feel casual. Full-time potential scores 7 out of 10. 3 successful projects can create approximately $78,000 after additional overhead. Scalability scores 6 out of 10. 8 projects can produce around $144,000 after central costs. But the scaled business carries more debt, payroll, and simultaneous market exposure. Margin of safety scores 6 out of 10. The base resale is $325,000. Break even is approximately $292,400. That creates room for mistakes. But not unlimited room. Overall, the business scores 5.5 out of 10. The profit is real. But it only survives when the acquisition price is disciplined, the renovation estimate is conservative, and the investor has enough cash to absorb delays. I began with a house that appeared to contain $160,000 of opportunity. After the renovation, the financing, the holding costs, the sale, and the owner's labor, only $30,000 remained. Then a $35,000 repair overrun and a $10,000 resale miss turned the same property into a $23,200 loss. That does not mean abandoned house flipping never works. The base case works, and the best modeled case can produce between $85,000 and $95,000. But the investor is not mainly being paid for replacing cabinets or painting walls. They are being paid for correctly pricing a collection of risks that ordinary buyers do not want: construction risk, legal risk, financing risk, time risk, and resale risk. The house is not valuable simply because it is cheap. It is valuable only when it is cheap enough. I wrote down the original numbers one last time. Purchase price, $165,000. Finished value, $325,000. Visible spread, $160,000. Economic profit, $30,000. Then I wrote the sentence that explained the entire business. The discount is the product. But that creates one final problem. The best abandoned houses are not invisible. They attract local investors, contractors, wholesalers, auction bidders, and experienced flippers with faster financing. The more obvious that the discount becomes, the more competition pushes the purchase price upward. And if profit is created at purchase, then the real business may not be renovating houses at all. It may be finding a profitable deal before someone else does.